Trump made a lot of the fact that he didn't start any new wars, and he learned how to manipulate the press.
ريان غريم الصحفي الاستقصائي والكاتب الأمريكي.
It's not clear exactly if somebody is working for Mossad or if Mossad is working for them.
What happened to the Democratic Party to lose to Trump?
It's like literally offensive to say that Israel's a foreign country. It's so weird. I went for 4 whole years
without
waging a new war. What'd you just say? What'd you say, Palestine? She's like, oh, am I not allowed to say that? Like, that's our bar in the United States. Because he knew that the tabloids would say, oh, Trump caught cheating with Madonna. Netanyahu said, I invited him to come to Israel. Sadly, now that won't happen. How am I being anti-Semitic toward Kevin McCarthy here?
For the election, America First resonated as if America is going to retreat. But in practice, it doesn't seem so. Ryan Grimm, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
Prominent investigative journalist for maybe more than 2 decades now. Currently, you are the co-founder of DropSite and the co-host at Breaking Points, which everyone can see on YouTube. We want to delve in this episode about the state of the union here in the US, because it seems that some radical shifts occurred during maybe the last decade or more. We will ask you about that. But we will begin by trying to see the state of this administration, the second term of Donald Trump administration, because if one takes a general look about his first 6 months maybe in office in his first term and his first 6 months in this term, it seems to be more focused. Maybe at the first term he took some decisions, but they were more labeled as symbolic. And I remember when watching the campaign of 2016, he was deemed by many journalists as a non-ideological player. He is performative, he's trying to rile up the right base, but he is not really an extremist maybe, or to the right that much. It seems things have changed now. Do you assess that's true, first of all, and if so, why?
Yes, well, I think on a personal level, and you have to analyze a lot of this administration from the personal because it does revolve around the whims of Donald Trump. I think he was radicalized by his 4 years in exile. He's somebody who organizes his entire worldview around whether or not somebody supports him or not. He doesn't care what they believe in, what they think. If they like him, he likes them. The Democrats came after him. And so they went from a nuisance to him, to his rivals, to his lethal enemies. At the same time, there was not a organized movement behind Donald Trump the first time. And a lot of Republicans expected him to lose to Hillary Clinton, and this would be an amusing, detour that the party took, and then it would be back on track with another Jeb Bush type figure, whether it's Marco Rubio or Chris Christie or somebody. They put the house back in order. That didn't happen, and so when Trump won, he didn't have a lot of loyalists or people who understood what his ideology was or necessarily shared it to staff his White House. They spent the 8 years, starting from January 2017 up until January of 2025, putting together the intellectual and operative structure to take advantage of the moment. In some ways, for Democrats and maybe for the country, Trump losing in 2020 was the worst of all worlds because it gave them the time to regroup, and they used it quite efficiently. And now they have hardcore ideologues who understand from their perspective what the stakes are, what the obstacles are, and how they can overcome them within the system that they're in.
Maybe during the first term, the main ideologue was Steve Bannon, who was portrayed as the main ideologue, but he was cast aside quickly. Who are the main figures and why he did choose these figures as the main proponents of a certain ideology that he would abide by or work by?
Yes, you're right. Bannon was out by June or July, and he pushed forward the Muslim ban a very like extremist version of a Muslim ban, and which is a great example of the way that the MAGA has kind of reorganized itself this time. They still did a Muslim ban, basically, but what they did is they did it by the quote unquote rules. They put out an executive order saying the president wants to know what countries what countries should he restrict immigration from, based on these criteria, not religion. DHS, tell us what you think, and DHS comes back with a list of Muslim countries.
It happens by coincidence.
Just coincidence. Like what are the chances? Oh, well, thank you. You went through this process. We stamp this, and everybody's happy. And the Republican courts look at it and say, okay, thank you for filling out the proper paperwork. We will now let you do this thing that previously was completely untoward. Now the main ideologues, number one would have to be Stephen Miller. And then number two, Russ Vought, who is the head of what's called the Office of Management and Budget. And while that sounds like an obscure position, it's at the center of everything. You can think of management and budget. That's actually that's pretty significant if you can handle both the budget and management. And so Russ Vought was was at OMB the first time around. Was considered a radical gadfly figure. Now he's back, and he spent the 4 years in between running this Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation, this right-wing organization's effort to intellectually produce a roadmap for Trump, which he, during the campaign, said that he wasn't going to do any of the stuff in here. But as we reported at the time, there was nothing else. Like, this was it. Like, this was the game in town for him. And now the guy who wrote it is in charge of carrying this out. Then the other, like I said, is Stephen Miller, who is maybe tied with Vought or ahead of Vought for being one of the most powerful non-elected figures in the last 50 years in Washington D.C. if not longer. Trump, I think he introduced him to Mohammed bin Zayed, or as this is the guy who runs my administration.
Wow.
He went with
bluntly.
him. Yeah, he went with him on the Gulf trip,
Yeah.
and I don't remember. I think it was MBZ, but he told somebody publicly, like with the cameras running, this is the guy who runs my administration, and everyone understands that to be the case. Susie Wiles is his chief of staff. She's extraordinarily powerful. It's not clear what her own ideological agenda is. She's very good at kind of running things. Yeah. But he's deputy chief of staff. He's an ideological zealot. He is as extreme as anybody he's the most extreme person to be in a position of that much power since, you have to go back 200 years in this country.
Oh. So when we were talking about these figures, what is the ideological framework that they hold? Mm-hmm. Because in the last rally for Charlie Kirk, which the president attended, and there was Stephen Miller and other figures, the line between religion and politics was really blurred. It's not really new in American politics, but I don't believe it was to that extent. I'm not sure if I'm right.
The Charlie Kirk Memorial certainly had the most, I would say, overt expression of far-right Christian nationalism that we've seen from a major party and from its major figures. In the 1980s and 1990s, we had in the U.S. what we called the moral majority. And this was a group of evangelical Christians who got George H.W. Bush, who was president at the time in the early 90s, to run on what he called family values, which is a coded way of speaking up for Christian nationalism. But it was veiled in more of within historical norms in the U.S. This what really was a breakout moment for that. When it comes to the framework that you would put some of their politics within, and particularly Stephen Miller, the administration, J.D. Vance in particular, gets very offended when you use the word fascism. I'm not so sure that in his private moments, Stephen Miller would even be offended by that. Like, I feel like we are close to a period where Stephen Miller would willingly say Mussolini was misunderstood. You know, there is real virtue to his ideas. Sure, it took a wrong turn in some places, in some cases, 6 million cases. Yeah. But the idea of patriotism, Christianity, a marriage of the state and corporate power toward creating overarching meaning for the citizens of the republic and hostility towards the non-citizens. Those ideas, I think he believes have merit and have value. You can see it in just if you watch his speech in particular. It would fit perfectly in a rally in 1920s or 1930s Italy.
But there is a certain misunderstanding about where does the isolationist mentality fit into that ideology, because before the election, America First resonated as if America is going to retreat.
Right.
But in practice, it doesn't seem so.
The imperialist tendencies within the Republican Party have sort of transformed what America First means to say that the idea that America after World War II was spreading democracy, freedom, standing up for human rights, what they would sometimes derisively call it being the policeman of the world. Yeah. They would say, that's over. We're not doing that anymore. We're taking care of our people first. But they will also say, if it's in America's interests to exert power in Venezuela or in Yemen or ally with Israel to take on Iran, if it's in America's interests, then we will do it in a raw, kind of realist foreign policy framing.
So it was a rift with the neoconservative trying to eliminate the fig leaf of spreading democracy and human rights.
Right,
That's
and they're fine. Most of them are fine to do that anyway, because it was always just window dressing for imperial power. Yeah. So they're like, oh, we don't have to even pretend. It seems like the definition of a neocon is narrowing very significantly. Now a neocon is. A couple years ago, it meant somebody who wanted to wage war all over the world. Now it means somebody who wants to wage war, but then also wants to engage in nation building and help build democracies in wherever they waged war. Yeah. And so if you are only waging war, you're only supportive of war, then that's okay.
But we won't get into the nation building.
Not going to do any nation building. It's basically like if you drop the bombs and then care what happens afterwards, then you're a neocon.
Which might suit the leaders of other countries
more. Right, but if you drop bombs and then you leave and go home, and it's not your problem, what happens after the bombs explode, then that's America First. Or that's the attempt to define America First. There's still, and led by kind of Tucker Carlson, Matt Gaetz wing of the party, people who are saying, no, America First actually means stay home, stay out of wars. It doesn't mean you can bomb and then just stop bombing and then you're fine.
This current that really fueled the Trump campaign with popular movement, and you say that they organized, it's because there are some figures that said something close to, but they were on the fringes. I remember maybe Pat Buchanan, Newt Gingrich, but sometimes they polled really at the lower figures, but also they were sometimes the butt of a joke. They weren't taken seriously.
Right.
When did it change? What was the inflection point that this now became the main current in the Republican Party?
I think one thing I think people don't think enough about is on the left they call lived experience. Veterans, for the most part, a lot of veterans are Democrats, but overwhelmingly, veterans, and particularly combat veterans, who are in their 30s and 40s now, served in Iraq, Afghanistan, or elsewhere in the global war on terror, are they're in their 30s, 40s, even 50s now, and a lot of those are Republicans, and you have millions of people now with experience in combat who believe that what they were fighting for was worse than meaningless. That their friends didn't just die for nothing, like they died for an evil cause. That what they were doing was making the world worse. That they were trampling on somebody else's land for no good reason. And that is a hard thing, I think, for people to absorb, because they, a lot of them went in as 18-year-olds who they don't know anything. A lot of them are poor, need health care, need work. They go in and they're given the patriotic speeches, and it takes a long time then to come to the conclusion, I'm being used for somebody else's profit. And Republican communities, even if not everybody served, and certainly not everybody served, in combat, every Republican friend group has somebody who did. So I think that is an overlooked part of it, that this is a real and organic reaction to being cannon fodder. And then it's preposterous. We were in Afghanistan for 20 plus years, in and out of Iraq, and then to see this endless genocide unfolding in Gaza, it's just too much for people. And at the same time, the economy.
Yeah, definitely. But shouldn't that fuel some support for the Democratic Party? Because the war on Iraq and Afghanistan and the turmoil that happened was during the Bush era. And trying to minimize the interaction with the Middle East, the military action in the Middle East, began with Obama to a certain extent. Why didn't it help the Democrats?
You would think it takes a peculiarly inept political party to have lost to the Republicans on the question of war and peace. Like the people that launched the invasion and occupation of Iraq, managed to take over the mantle. Partly, Trump very effectively portrayed himself as an anti-war candidate. He was actually supportive of the Iraq War. You can find
he denied it later.
Yeah. But so he understood the optics, and you can find some footage of him after the invasion, fairly soon after the invasion, saying that it's not going well, it's not a good thing. But he really leaned into the idea that he was against the war. Wasn't true, but saying that he was against it alone mattered politically in the Republican Party. Yeah. People wouldn't even lie and say they were against it. So at least he would lie about that. And then in the Biden years, he very aggressively, funded Ukraine in its war with Russia after Russia invaded, even as it sent energy prices skyrocketing, and it was causing more inflation here at home. And then I think the constant and endless funding of Israel while it was waging its genocide in Gaza, put those, and Trump made a lot of the fact that he didn't start any new wars. That's our bar in the United States. I went for 4 whole years
without
waging a new war.
Yeah.
I continued waging the one in Afghanistan, even though I said I wouldn't. I did a lot of drone strikes around the world, but I didn't launch a new ground invasion of any countries. And the American public, wow.
That's enough.
Amazing. Come on back. So he successfully marketed it himself as.
And he said he would end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours, and also in Gaza.
Right. Yeah.
And he did.
And he did end. He did get a ceasefire on the day of his inauguration.
Yeah.
he let Netanyahu blow it up weeks later. As you know, he did not end the war in Ukraine.
Sure.
Though he certainly tried. And I think he was being honest.
He wished that it would be.
Yeah,
that
I think he
simple.
thought he was going to call Putin and say, "All right, Joe's gone, fun is over, wrap it up," and Putin would just say, "Okay, I want this territory, call it a day," and that didn't work out. And Trump has said as much.
Now, if we move to the Democratic Party, we'll come back to the foreign question, because foreign policy is a current issue even in local politics. Many people say that, okay, half of the rise of Trump is because of all the reasons that you just mentioned, and the other half is just the Democratic Party just fueled that rise. We went back to the Iraq War and the Bush years. Some were really hopeful with the election of Obama, that the whole racial question is now behind us. And even on the political issues, running his campaign in 2008, he seemed really progressive and really populist in some of the measures. That his term in office wasn't as radical as his campaign was. What happened to the Democratic Party to lose to Trump, while, as you said at the beginning, they were confident, and even the Republicans were confident, that Trump doesn't really have any chance against Hillary Clinton in the 16 elections? What happened that they lost that election, and what happened then, even when they were back into office, they couldn't really stay there?
There's so much going on. Obama was a disappointment for people who, I think kind of layered onto him the hopes that he invited. He very much wanted people to believe in a particular image of him, even if you squinted, you could see that wasn't really what he was necessarily saying. He came in at a time when the economy was just flatlining, losing 700,000 jobs in 1 month or something,
after
just
the 2008
financial crisis. And people were angry, and people wanted accountability, and people wanted bailouts. 11 million people a year were getting foreclosed on for several years in a row. And instead of bailing out people, Bush started the bailout, Obama pushed for the bailout, and then Obama did the second half of the bailout as president, and then did not prosecute a single criminal who was associated with the scams that led to the financial crisis. And when he tried to inject stimulus into the economy, because of this misplaced concern about the deficit at the time, the party went too light. And so the economic recovery as a result was extremely slow. Then they lost the House after the 2010 Tea Party wave. And Republicans then hit the brakes hard on the economy. And Democrats leaned into that. They said, "You're right. We do need to tighten our belt. We need to, people need to
cut expenditure."
Yes, austerity. It's time for austerity, and Republicans very deliberately slowed the economy down, and you see it just flat from 2011, 12, 13, 14, 15 into 2016. It's growing at a very tiny pace, but people had lost so much in 2008 that every year the anger is just growing and growing, and it feels like you're never going to catch up. You're never going to get back to where you were. You're not going to get to where your parents were and your grandparents, and that this whole idea that we have a lot of problems in the United States, but they're overcome by the fact that every generation is going to do better than the last. And we're all willing to suck up all of these problems so that things are better for our children and their children. And people stopped believing that. Stopped even believing they could have children and afford them. And so into that gap comes Donald Trump, and he's still only squeaked by. Ironically, as we're sitting here in Washington, James Comey is now being charged with one count of fudging things to Congress. And Comey in the 2016 campaign announced at the very end of it that he was launching an investigation into Hillary Clinton for her email practices.
It was a whole scandal.
Yeah, and might charge her criminally, but wasn't going to in the end, he said, because while she did terrible things, they weren't criminal. That knocked her down in the polls. Then 3 or 4 days before the election, he comes out again and says, after reviewing, I reviewed new emails, and nothing new came up, so I'm still not charging her. And that too drove her further down, because they're like, what is this?
But then why wasn't he enough for Trump now that he's really...
There's no gratitude. Like, without Comey, Trump does not become president. That's the ultimate irony. It's it's these Greek fiction writers who are writing perfect stories that have to wrap up in neat bows. Comey then, when Trump becomes president, launches the investigation into collusion with Russia, and
which also ended up with no results.
Right, nothing.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and then Democrats do the same thing. All these indictments and nothing.
Yeah, some say that these indictments that you referred to that fueled Trump's anger towards the Democrats, and he became more fearful in his second term. But after the Obama years came the election, before we reached to Hillary versus Trump at the final elections, it was a surprise with the surge of the Bernie Sanders campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And then the progressive wing of the Democratic Party really seemed to be at the forefront. But he didn't win. The question would be then, as I know that lots of journalists in the US say that the Democratic Party was beginning to lean to the right since the 70s.
Yep.
Gradually. And then maybe the pinnacle of that label was the Clinton period, where he was really a Republican light party. Why did the reaction to the Obama failure to really fulfill the hopes that he triggered engendered the surgence of the progressive wing of the party? And why at the same time didn't that wing of the party take over its establishment, while Trump at the Republican Party managed to do that takeover?
Right. So the Sanders wing, Bernie Sanders himself, he'd been saying the same thing for decades. The millionaires and billionaires are ripping us all off. Every other country has universal health care, better schools, higher minimum wage. We don't, because of the millionaires and billionaires. That was he'd been saying that for decades, and it finally started to land with people after the financial crisis. And his authenticity, his honesty. Like, you can't manufacture 40 years of the same sound bites.
Yes.
People were finding tapes of him in the 1970s before he was in office, long before he was in office, sounding just like himself. And he also was one of those people who, by the time he was like 28, he looked like he was 65. And he just stayed that way.
He's consistent in the looks.
Yes. He was just preserved as a 65-year-old for 50 straight years. And he's still today, he's like Joe Biden can't form a sentence.
Yeah, he's everywhere.
Bernie's still got more energy than his young staffers. And so people really invested hope in his campaign. Like, okay, Obama didn't do it, but this guy, like, he has taken all the slings and arrows over the years to say these things. He must really mean them. He calls himself a democratic socialist, which is politically damaging. Wow. So the only reason he would do that would be if it's true. And so people really invested a lot of hope in him. Trump, meanwhile, I think the key difference was the media. So for Trump, as he started catching momentum, every news network, every cable network would play all of his rallies live.
Even the left-leaning.
Even often MSNBC, because they would gawk at it.
Yeah,
it
was fun.
it was fun and it was terrifying and ridiculous and outrageous. And can you believe this? Now, some of that is on Bernie in the sense that his speeches didn't vary much.
Yeah.
You heard one Bernie speech, you probably
Replicate it.
you heard them all. So it's not good television. Like, you need to mix it up in the way that Trump would mix it up. And Trump had spent, if you think about it, by that point he had spent 40 years being famous for really no reason.
It's a brand. He became a brand.
Just a brand. And what is a brand? It's nothing. He was a real estate developer with like a pretty catchy last name. But that was it. He
had his beauty pageants. And
his beauty pageants, yeah. And he casinos that he put his name on, and he learned how to manipulate the press. He had a fake name, John Barron, and he named one of his kids Barron after this fake person. So he made up a fake person called John Barron, who he said was a close friend of Trump's. And you talk to any reporters who talked to John Barron, they said he sounded exactly like Trump. And
he used to call reporters with that name?
Yes. So he would call the reporters and say, "This is John Barron. I have an incredible story for you about Trump. But you can't source it to me, but I promise you this is true." And he would say, Donald Trump is dating Madonna. Like, that's one, for instance. Completely untrue.
It's even untrue, but okay.
Not true.
He's trying to forge the image.
Yeah, and at the time when he told this lie, or had John Barron told this lie, he was married. So he was reporting on a fake affair because he knew that the tabloids would say, "Oh, Trump caught cheating with Madonna."
Yeah.
And Madonna's seeing this and being like, "What?"
But here, a parenthesis, just to ask a question. If you are riding up the conservative Christian family values base, but you have this brand, how did it click? How did the evangelist and everyone pick this guy to push forward for the family values?
It did not click at first. They were quite hostile to him for a long time. And so as he rose, not only did you have all the media covering him, but once it became clear that he was on the rise, Fox kind of turned. They tried to take him out. There's this amazing moment where Megyn Kelly starts a debate and apparently got a call from Murdoch to Ailes saying, "Okay, enough with this. Pull the plug. Like, we're done with this guy." And so she starts the debate by listing out all of the women he had said horrible things about or like assaulted.
It's the famous moment. No, it's only Rosie O'Donnell.
Right. Yeah, and he responds with this from a tactical political perspective, this brilliant response. "I only said that about Rosie O'Donnell."
He deflected the whole
the entire thing, and people are laughing, and it's chaos, and then you forget.
So that was during the moment Fox News was trying to push him down.
Yes, and the reporting since then was that Megyn Kelly was told by Ailes through Murdoch, "It's time to finish this guy off. Like, we've had our fun, but this guy's dangerous. We can't control him. He needs to be outed. He needs to be ousted." And instead, Megyn Kelly was the one that took the beating out of that. And so then they just kind of fall in behind him. Whereas the Democratic media, which you could call, say, CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, Washington Post, they either ignored the Sanders campaign, citing the fact that Hillary Clinton had all of these superdelegates, and that even if he won all of these primaries, because she had so many superdelegates, it's over. Like, so we're covering. She won. She's gonna be the winner. We know she's gonna be the winner. So this is interesting that he's got all these supporters coming up to these rallies and polling ahead of her and actually polling better against Trump than she is, but whatever. Not interesting. So he never had any media apparatus behind him whatsoever.
But then the movement that was gathering behind him gradually, also even now he has many people that are in Congress, even in the Senate. all of them together, they weren't able to take over the Democratic
Right.
Party, even in the last election.
Right. Even when party establishment figures decided that they needed to bring this wing of the party in. So Chuck Schumer, for instance, who's now the Senate leader, right after the 2016 campaign, there was a race for the chair of the Democratic National Committee. So the party's, it's a bureaucratic position running the party operation. Keith Ellison, who was one of the only Muslim members of Congress from Minneapolis, actually served in the same district that Ilhan Omar now represents. He's now Attorney General in Minnesota. He ran for DNC chair. And pretty quickly, Randi Weingarten, who's a well-respected establishment figure, that she's the head of the teachers union, and Chuck Schumer came out and said, we support Ellison. And this is our olive branch to the Bernie wing of the party. Because Ellison was one of the only members of Congress. That's the crazy thing. Even though half of the Democratic base supported Sanders, he had like 2 members of Congress who endorsed him. Something, maybe 2.
Yeah.
And I think 1 senator, Jeff Merkley. So they said, all right, this is our olive branch. We're going to support Ellison. And you had Haim Saban, who's one of the biggest donors to AIPAC and one of the biggest donors to the Democratic Party, come out and say, I'm leaving the party if he wins. We have to draw a line here. And he ended up getting beaten. And so, even with people like Schumer and Weingarten, the party establishment couldn't find any space, even in what are effectively symbolic positions for elements of this wing of the party. Then, of course, in 2018, you start to have a shock to the democratic system with the election of what became known as the Squad. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez takes
Ilhan
out.
Omar and Rashida Tlaib. You wrote a book about the rise of the Squad. It's the second book on the issue. You had a former book. Don't you think that one of the problems that hit this wing of the Democratic Party, the progressive wing, is that while Bernie Sanders was talking about class politics, it's, the haves versus the have-nots, the Squad, not all of them, mainly AOC and maybe a couple of other figures, leaned into the identity politics much more than Bernie Sanders did, which backfired at the end because it really was at the forefront with the woke movement and stuff that preceded class politics. And now it seems that they are backtracking a little bit.
Yeah, and the history there is fascinating, and I go into it at some length in the book. Because one of the ironies is that this rise of kind of woke politics was fueled deliberately by the Hillary Clinton campaign. Because the Clinton campaign saw Bernie Sanders coming and saw that he was more progressive than he's Democratic socialist. He's gonna be to her left.
And she had her speeches with Wall Street
Goldman
and
Sachs
stuff,
and Clinton and NAFTA, she's got her whole. She's stuck where she is in a neoliberal set of economic politics, and so they said, well, what we can do is triangulate. We can come at him from the left on these cultural issues. And they started calling him a single issue candidate, which is ironic. And they said, what's the single issue? Well, then they said the economy.
It's a broad issue.
That's
It's a broad issue.
That's a pretty big issue. But they say it's just one issue. And she had this whole refrain that she would make where she would say, Bernie Sanders wants to break up the banks, but if you break up the banks, would that end racism? And then crowd says, no. If you break up the banks, would that end homophobia? If you break up the banks, would that end sexism? Would that end mistreatment of immigrants? Would that end Islamophobia? They say, no. Which there's so many obvious surface level problems with that question. It's like, well, he's not saying that it would end those things. Although, in fact, if you address the root economic problems that a lot of people have, you may actually do something to address racism. Banks do actually play a role through redlining and through discriminatory policies.
To favor people over others.
Yeah, they actually do. So, hammering the banks could actually reduce racism in some ways if you did it the right way. He didn't have much of an answer for that, because that the energy around these cultural issues was getting more powerful, and a lot of Sanders supporters felt stung by it, because these are left-wing people. They're committed to their class politics and to ending homophobia and sexism and racism. And so in 2018...
That's during the era where he was slammed with the Bernie bro issue. And
right, exactly.
That he's favored by white males.
Right. And now here we are 10 years later, and the party is stunned that no white men, even young white men, will support the party.
Yeah, they went to the podcaster world.
Right, yeah.
To the right.
Yeah, they said, how can we get our own Joe Rogan? Joe Rogan supported Bernie Sanders. Like, they had a Joe Rogan, and his name was Joe Rogan. And they called him racist and called all of his listeners racist, and drove them out of the party, and now wonder why they don't like them anymore. And so by 2018, when the squad is winning elections and picking off these candidates, it allowed Bernie supporters to feel good and say, you can't call them racist,
or sexist,
or sexist. Like because of the four women, 2 black women, 1 African American, 1 Somalian American, 1 Palestinian, 1 Puerto Rican. So how is Chuck Schumer or Nancy Pelosi going to say that they are Bernie bros? And so there was a
overcompensation.
There was and they themselves ran very heavily on class issues. But they were in some ways a victim of their identities in an era where identity politics was the thing that everybody saw politics through. And so Sanders and AOC could say mostly the same thing, but people would hear it from AOC as more woke than they would hear it from Bernie Sanders, who's an old white guy. And then, obviously, the younger people like Omar and AOC, et cetera, had much more just fluency and facility with, talking about trans issues or talking about, broadly LGBT issues or something, whereas it was obvious to everybody that, Bernie had, whatever, he's for equality.
Yeah.
But he doesn't know the details of it. He had actually, as mayor of Burlington, apparently had enacted some of the first trans rights policies. So it's not like he was hostile to any of that. Separately, and there's some interesting data in this that's never really been explored. It seems pretty likely that one of the reasons that a fair number of people voted for Bernie Sanders in these primaries in 2016 is that they assumed he was more moderate than Clinton on these cultural issues because of the way Clinton was attacking him. So in other words, if you were a conservative Democrat, ironically, paradoxically,
you might lean towards Sanders
because you're being told that she's the woke one and he's not.
Yeah.
And these conservative Democrats are like, well, I'm not woke. So I guess I'm with this guy, and people didn't really understand that. So that misunderstanding probably cost him a little bit in 2020 when he kind of went further left culturally, but not as much as people make.
But then wouldn't the Democratic Party be doomed to lose the elections if it transformed itself from the party that supports the laborers or the workers in the country, middle class or lower class, to the party that supports the minorities, because the minorities are minorities, and
right, by definition.
by definition. So,
but they didn't even hold the support of minorities. Yes.
Yeah, they lost even the Latinos maybe in the last election.
Right, because and also they were shedding. They still overwhelmingly won the black vote, but they won it by much less. And obviously a significant number of those what Democrats call marginalized people, which most marginalized people don't like being called marginalized people. Understood that a lot of this wokeism was their bosses or professors or upper middle class white Americans deflecting class issues, and that they weren't actually seriously supportive of they're supportive of civil rights, but not to the extent that it would cost them anything. And so it had this effect of not only losing white working class voters in exchange for these more upper class white voters and upper class across the board, but then also losing black and Hispanic working class voters as well, who, as you mentioned, also listen to all these podcasts and have more class aligned interests and approach to the world than I think Democrats understood, because they saw so much of politics as through the prism of race.
And through this internal clash in the Democratic Party, with in parallel what's going on in the Republican Party and the rise of Trump and now this administration, does this explain the whole spotlight that has been gone to the Zohran Mamdani campaign? Because usually a mayorship elections doesn't really have a global resonance. This is what explained this fight. So it seems that if this progressive group inside the Democratic Party is making headways.
Yeah, so Mamdani, he flowed out of that same post-2016 tendency. He is elected in, I believe, 2020 as a state assembly member. I remember covering his first campaign. He and a whole group of socialists won seats up and down the ballot, kind of in the wake of the AOC win. And they fought, as elected officials, they had to respond to their constituents, and what their constituents were concerned about was the price of electricity, the cost of living in New York City, and I think that kept that class of politicians kind of grounded in those material concerns. And so when he launched his mayoral campaign, he didn't shy away from he didn't flip on the cultural issues, but did not remotely put them front and center. Everybody knows what he put front and center because he was so good at the messaging around it. The cost of living, the rent is too high, city's not affordable, childcare is not affordable, buses are too slow and too expensive. And there's nothing woke in any of that. And people are like, right now the problem is for Democrats trying to replicate this, is he was almost produced in a lab. His father is an acclaimed anti-colonial scholar, Mamdani, the Columbia professor, author of so many influential books, and his mother's one of the best directors in the world, and so he had a combination of really good politics,
some attachment to pop culture,
and a way of doing mass media. So plus apparently they were good parents, because if they weren't, he'd be like a right wing. He'd be rebelling against them. So that's all you need is to get somebody whose parents are, an anti-colonial scholar. The other one's a famous director,
if
and
this is
they're
the recipe,
actually,
it's really hard.
and
to
they're
make.
actually good parents and involved in their child's upbringing. So that's all you need.
Just that.
Yes.
So it seems that no one knows the future, but it seems that the upcoming clash would be between those two wings of the Republican Party, with the heritage of Trump, whatever.
You would think, yeah.
You would think. and this surging progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Where does foreign policy come into this, forging this whole framework that we have now? Because one remembers the impact of the Iraq war on domestic politics. And now it seems that the Israeli question and the Gaza war is the second big issue that defines even people in local politics, and as now it's known, the Zohran Mamdani campaign and the question which country would you first visit as a mayor. So it's even in the mayoral election, it's a question. How come this question, especially the Israeli question, because usually the pro-Israel lobby is really strong in the US, flip side this time around?
And so my book on the squad came out in December 2023,
Yep.
but as you know, that means it was, the writing was finished in the spring or so, long before October 7th. Yet even I was surprised when I went back and did the audiobook going through it, like half the book is about AIPAC and DMFI.
This was the follow-up question.
Yeah, because I think this is related because it goes to the question of how the Democrats are going to be able to work through these questions. So when the squad comes in, they're immediately met with millions of dollars in spending out of the gate, just trying to destroy them.
Because they mentioned something against the Israeli lobby or money in politics, or just because their whole ideology seemed a threat?
So when Ocasio-Cortez was running in the spring of 2018, this is while the Great March of Return is going on. And there was a massacre. I think 40-some people shot and killed. And she went onto Twitter, which was Twitter at the time, and said, this is an atrocity. This is a war crime. And we need to call this out. And people were shocked at the time because it's a New York politician. It was understood that nobody in New York does this. And it signaled to people, like, oh, this is something unusual is happening here. And it was also just utterly unobjectionable. And as she said, look, I'm just saying, like, if you're nonviolently protesting, whether you're in Puerto Rico or the Bronx, you should not be gunned down. Like, how is this even a controversial statement? She then went on a program after the primary and used the word Palestine,
which was enough to,
and it just said
to rile up.
Yeah, and you could see her, and the interviewer is like, "Whoa, I've got you here. What'd you just say? What'd you say, Palestine?" She's like, oh, "Am I not allowed to say that?" You could tell it. She's like,
she was surprised.
She's also surprised, like, because this is, and I talked to her about this because I had a similar upbringing where it wasn't an issue that my parents talked about, that my community talked about, and so both of us kind of as adults kind of come to it cold, and we're like, you can't do this to people.
Yeah.
This is wrong, and then to be told no, that opinion is offensive. That what they're doing. What do you mean that's offensive? How?
On what basis?
On what basis is this? How is it offensive to say that you shouldn't kill unarmed innocent people? And then this idea that there are all these words that you don't even know are offensive, and you don't know if they genuinely are offensive or if somebody's just messing with you, like Palestine. Like, how's this a word?
Yeah, to call the name of the people.
This is the name. And so, and then as I write about in the book, AIPAC calls her up and says, we've got $150,000 for you that we've raised just to help you out. And we'd love to meet with you and educate you because we understand you have a good heart. You're in the right place. You've just been led astray by the propaganda. Sit down with us. Because everything is complex and complicated. That's the argument.
That's
that they
a bit
often
condescending when she is elected now.
She just won the office. Yeah, we're going to we'll educate you on this, and she said no, keep your money. I'm not interested in that. So there's that, And then there's the fact that both Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib are Muslim. Like, I think just their identity alone was enough. And Rashida Tlaib in particular.
No, she's Palestinian.
Like, absolutely terrifying to have an actual Palestinian woman in Congress, even though she'd never led at all with that, and never said that, like, I'm going to Congress to stand up for Palestinian rights.
Usually that in the political climate in the U.S. and the money and politics, leading up with that wouldn't bring you many voters or many allies.
Although in Detroit,
in Detroit maybe.
Could be, which is where she was running. So it wouldn't hurt her.
Yeah.
But she led on environmental justice. Like, she grew up there, and the pollution is like literally killing people at scale, and that's the thing that she was running on. And so
they were also, Ilhan Omar and Rashid Tlaib were thought of just directly, just when they were elected, or it waited something for something they had to say about the conflict, or it was just because they won the election, it was now time to just try to tighten up the belt.
Well, the first thing they used against Ilhan Omar was Kevin McCarthy, who became Speaker later, said that he was going to launch some investigation into Omar for something, like, and she said, he's doing the bidding of his donors. It's all about the Benjamins. The Benjamins being a reference to a rap song about money. And then somebody said, well, whose money? And she said, AIPAC, what are you talking about? And a firestorm hit her. How dare you? This is anti-Semitic. What are you saying? What are you trying to imply here? And from her perspective, she's like, Kevin McCarthy is like Irish. What are you talking about? Like, how am I being anti-Semitic toward Kevin McCarthy here?
Yeah.
And people said, no, you're saying that Jews control Washington when you say this. And she apologized.
She apologized.
She even apologized and said that she didn't mean to. She heard from Jewish friends who felt like she was playing into tropes, and she retracted and apologized. They still moved forward to censure her, like on the floor of the House of Representatives. And around this time, AIPAC spun off a new super PAC called Democratic Majority for Israel, which raised millions of dollars that they were going to then spend in the 2020 campaign, but against Bernie Sanders in his presidential campaign. Jewish, by the way.
That was a question, because he wouldn't be fought back with any anti-Semitism.
So they just called him self-hating.
Yeah.
The first money that this AIPAC offshoot ever spent was against Bernie Sanders in Iowa in his presidential campaign. They then spent millions of dollars trying to stop Jamal Bowman from winning office in 2020. And people forget this, he beat this guy named Eliot Engel, who had been in office for something like 25 years and was the chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee.
We in the Middle East know about this name.
Oh, you know Eliot Engel? Yes. He's
from during the Bush era.
Yeah. And so Jamal Bowman knocked him off despite millions of dollars being spent against him. Cori Bush, ran the same year. But then, of course, as people know, 4 years later, they spent tens of millions of dollars knocking them back out. And so it's a long way of answering the question, which is that the clash between the kind of corporate wing of the Democratic Party and the Sanders wing of the Democratic Party never got to play out in full, because just as it got going, hundreds of millions of dollars came in from pro-Israel groups to smash the progressive wing, and not because of their class politics. Now it helped, no doubt. Like if you have $10 million to give to a super PAC, you don't like Bernie Sanders politics.
Definitely, because he's talking about just removing money from politics.
Yeah, he's talking about you.
So you're out.
So it wasn't the driving reason, but it was a nice feature that, okay, we can defend Israel by going after the Sanders wing of the party, but we can also defend the corporate wing of the Democratic Party, which is going to protect us when it comes to the tax and regulatory policies that we want for for our own purposes of continuing to aggregate wealth, and so that
preceded the whole wave of the 7th of October and its aftermath.
Right.
So it's not the story just about the 7th of October
Not
and
at
what
all.
happened later on.
Yeah, not at all. And so yes, 2022, AIPAC spent like $50 million making sure that all of these candidates who were coming up and agreed with the squad on their class politics and also were critical of Israel, not even anywhere near where a lot of people are today, but just modest criticism. Like maybe we should put some conditions on the weapons that we send. Like that alone would be enough to get millions of dollars spent against them, and it flipped a decent number of elections. So by the time that next class was sworn in, that was in office in 2022, 3 and 4, it was much smaller. Like it was a rump faction compared to what it would have been without the outside intervention from the pro-Israel money.
Yeah.
And then October 7th happens, and they spent in the 2024 election, they spent like 150 million or so, 100 million.
It's growing exponentially.
Yeah, because there's a real asymmetry involved. Like $100 million is an enormous amount of money to spend in American politics. A couple $1 million can move a congressional race, but a lot of these billionaires' wealth fluctuates by a few $100 million every day. So they can cut those checks.
And on a foreign issue, on a foreign policy issue, so it's not domestic politics. So
Right. But it helps that at the same time they're suppressing the left populism. So it's 2 for 1, 2 for the price of 1.
But from the Israeli point of view, it seems that during the Netanyahu era, which is a long era, but I'm talking about the last third of it at least, usually the Israeli question is a bipartisan issue in America. They are all pro-Israel and it's not an issue. It seems that during the last decade, maybe gradually, the pro-Israel lobbies are leaning towards the Republicans more and more, as if they are part of this local political problem in the U.S. But at the same time, now we are hearing some voices from the right criticizing Israel, like Tucker Carlson, like Candace Owens, and other influencers. I don't know what to name them other than that. How did this antagonism toward Israel slip into the right, even though it wasn't usually an issue?
Right. It was a poorly thought out strategy from Israel's perspective, if you ask me, to completely, they didn't completely abandon the Democratic Party. They still have their allies in the leadership level, but that's their only toehold left. And it really began in the Obama era, and particularly accelerated when Obama pushed for the Iran nuclear deal and got it through over AIPAC's and Israel's objections. And Netanyahu even came to the House of Representatives in 2015 to speak to Congress against the wishes of the American president. It's an extraordinary moment.
It happened with any other foreign leader? I guess not.
You can do that. You can just come into Congress.
One can just try to now think of if any foreign leader
like
comes
Erdogan,
to talk against Trump. Now.
Erdogan gets invited to speak to Congress against Trump. He wouldn't leave the country. And so that leaves them then to align with the Republican Party. But the Republican Party has a huge faction of white nationalist voters, like an organized faction. I remember seeing there's this book that has onion headlines throughout the history, and there's a headline is something like Nazis team up with Japanese in poorly thought out alliance. It's like,
it's a satirical magazine.
Yeah. It's like, so Israel teams up with anti-Semites in poorly thought out alliance. And Israel and AIPAC had spent the last 10 or 20 years saying that if you criticize Israel, you're anti-Semitic. So they went around lumping these two things together.
Being Jewish and Israel.
And yes, that, which absolutely is just not true and not the case. And I would argue was like contradictory. I think like there's what Israel is doing is in contravention of the best Jewish values. But they won't say that. AIPAC won't say that. And so they lump it together. And you have a ton of Republicans who are like, oh, okay, then I'm against Israel. That's some faction of it. So they had that built in. Then you have the isolationists and the genuine America firsters who just recoil at the idea that another country is going to tell us what to do. And the debate in America around Israel was so stunted that even referring to Israel in Washington as a foreign country was like offensive to some people.
Yeah, I remember the interview of Tucker Carlson with Ted Cruz when he told him, "Don't you think that AIPAC is like a foreign country, foreign lobby?"
How dare you?
Yeah, he was was shocked by the question.
Right, how dare you? It's like literally offensive to say that Israel's a foreign country. It's so weird. There's this base of skepticism over the relationship, and for people under like 40, no matter what party you're in, there's virtually no support for the U.S. relationship as it exists with Israel.
But suddenly you see that the Israeli question, at least, appears from everywhere, even the Epstein case.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly there are some reports, I'm not sure if they are verified or not yet, that he might be using this connections and this whole thing that he does, I don't know what's the right terminology, to serve a foreign intelligence. That might be the Mossad or whatever, because some connection. What are these reports? Are they credible, or?
It's interesting. So we've done a lot of reporting on this question, and we've got, by the time this interview airs, may have had some more of those stories out. It's not as simple as a question as it seems, because the way that elite networks work nowadays is amorphous, and it's not clear exactly if somebody is working for Mossad or if Mossad is working for them. So you'll have current and former Israeli government officials, Russian government officials, Norwegian government officials, American government officials, all working together on these multinational, business projects around, weapons, cyber technology, and diplomacy, like building security agreements between countries that then involve transfers of cyber technology and weapons, and so then what is that? Like, is that a Mossad operation? Is that a Israeli operation? Is it business? Is it? And the answer is it's all of it. So it's one big giant network of elites who are both working for their own profit and also working, on behalf of their governments. And all of the Epstein files that we've gotten access to show him to be like right at the center of all of this. and particularly with working a lot with Ehud Barak, former defense minister, former prime minister, who became a significant figure in the rise of Israeli cyber technology around the world, and its proliferation around the world, which is a significant historical development. And so then the question would be, were the young girls who were trafficked, does he have compromising footage or knowledge of this type of trafficking that is then helpful to him in brokering these security agreements, these arms deals, these cyber deals, and that a lot of that remains to be seen. Although it's like a lot of that also operates in an unspoken place, where it's like people know what he knows, and they know who he knows.
So he doesn't need to pull out the evidence.
Right.
The fear of it might be there is enough.
Yeah, you want to do this deal? Just do the deal. I'm going to go ahead and do that deal. Sure. Yeah. Maybe I don't like these terms. Maybe I don't think it's a great deal.
But one would think that there are many questions about Epstein that because of the magnitude of the story of the sex trafficking ring, how can it be that just one person can just manufacture such big relationships with such big people? And first of all, I don't know until now if there are any evidence about how did he made his fortune.
Right. That's the hilariously unanswered question.
Yeah, even in the prosecution that's going on, it's never been answered.
Right. Most people, if they're super rich, why they're super rich.
Yeah, he has to have
their parents. Their parents owned an oil company. Their parents own Tiffany's. Or they themselves shorted the housing market in 2007. Like you kind of know how somebody made their money.
Yeah.
This guy wound up with a jet and a mansion and hundreds of millions of dollars. A jet and a mansion that are wired up with video and audio.
Yeah.
And nobody knows where he got the money. Now a lot of it, he got control of Les Wexner's money. Victoria's Secret guy, very close friend of Israel. Why? Like how did he's a tax? Supposedly he's a tax guy. And I'm sure he's looking through the emails, and he's got some decent tax advice that we've seen in there. But is it worth $1 billion? It's like
and how does a tax guy have these kinds of relationships? Usually a good
when I say tax guy, is more of an accountant, and the type of it helps. The type of work he was doing was he's moving a lot of money around, and so people, I think, trusted that he could get money in the right places in untraceable ways. But that doesn't answer the question of how this school teacher wound up with hundreds of millions of dollars.
And from these gaps in the story comes the questions about the relation between him and maybe intelligence agencies.
Unless you can think of some other way that all this money landed in his lap. Yeah, that's the one we're going to have to go with.
And even in the Charlie Kirk assassination, maybe Netanyahu inflicted that on himself when he tried to deflect the attention from Charlie Kirk's murder onto Israel, and that he wants to visit Israel. But everywhere you see in this question that is antagonizing to people. Was that related to Netanyahu inflicted that on himself, or the recent reports that some of the entourage of Charlie Kirk said that there were tensions between him and some of the Israeli lobbyists or pro-Israeli lobbyists?
Yeah, there were definitely tensions. And if you notice, Netanyahu said, I invited him to come to Israel. Sadly, now that won't happen. What's missing in there is his response to the invitation.
Yeah, Kirk's response,
which was to decline. And Netanyahu's playing a slippery game there by saying it won't happen. Yeah, of course it won't happen. He was killed.
Yeah.
But he wasn't going to happen anyway because he told you no. But it's also interesting that Netanyahu kept inserting himself into it. He is one of the smartest, political actors on the global stage. He knows that when he puts out a 2-minute video declaring himself innocent of murdering Charlie Kirk, all that's going to do is
To
fuel
raise
questions.
suspicions.
Yeah, here in the U.S. we have this silly joke. It says like, my "I didn't kill Charlie Kirk" T-shirt is raising more questions than it is.
Yeah.
Is getting people to ask a lot of questions that are answered by the T-shirt. Like, why are you bothering me with this? So clearly, in his mind, there's advantage to him in having people talk about this.
Oh, you think it's a reverse play?
It absolutely is. There's no other reason that he would put out a video like that.
What might this benefit be?
So I think, on the one hand, I think there could be two benefits. I think, on the one hand, and it's an old play by Netanyahu and other leaders in Israel to actively antagonize anti-Semitism around the world, in order to tell his domestic audience that the anti-Semitic wolves around the world are at the gate, and he's there to protect them, and the purpose of Israel is to be a safe space. And the way he then continues to demonstrate it is by pointing to these wolves, and if there aren't enough wolves,
You rile them up.
he riles up the wolves. Could be a knock-on bonus to. I think he wants to split the kind of Candace Owens wing away from the MAGA coalition, and I think he thinks if he can sharpen the contradictions and make them look crazy, because I don't think that he killed Charlie Kirk.
Wow.
Most people don't, and so if he can get them saying, like, because they haven't actually gone. Candace doesn't say that, but she leaves open
The question.
the question. I think he thinks if he can get her to go all the way there, her and Tucker and the others, if he can try to get them there, then he can Alex Jones them and say these people are
Crazy.
They're toxic. They're crazy. Don't listen to anything they say about Gaza or Iran or restraining Israel. Like, they're lunatics. Let's, us adults, just talk among us ourselves and keep these wackos out of here.
That's interesting.
But that's my best guess, because clearly he did it.
Yeah. Well, when
purpose.
one watches that interview, one would say, well, why?
Yeah, and also when he was interviewed by Greta Van Susteren on Newsmax, it very clearly appears that he was ready for that question, as if he
It's rehearsed.
asked for that question to be asked. And I actually called Greta to ask her that, and she wouldn't confirm or deny that, which that's the kind of thing that if it wasn't true, she would say,
She
no,
would
no,
deny.
he didn't ask me to ask him about that.
Yeah.
You can tell as she's asking the question that she doesn't really want to be asking the question. She thinks it's going to make her look a little weird.
Yeah, that's a very interesting take on this
So
issue.
he planted that question, and so he wants that storyline out there.
Maybe we can wrap up on a certain issue that is related to this whole issue about the state of the union today with these wars. And some would say from the left that sometimes it's better, and I heard it maybe in 2016, that maybe it's better now for Trump to win. So the people would see the full wrath of the far right, and everyone would then come to us. Do you think that this might be the case in this term? Or another mindset would say that there are irreversible policies and with irreversible effects that would take place when such a radical administration comes in place, and then you cannot just return to the ways that were before the election and say that people now will fluctuate to the other side?
Yeah, I think it's more like that. I think it's more the latter, that irreversible damage is being done to the civic life.
And then what form would that take?
It's a good question. What does the United States look like with liberal civil society smashed? We've always been a pretty harsh, individualistic place, buttressed by and buffered by our university system, which is the envy of the world. Research, science, pretty well-educated population. That cross-pressured against some of those, baser and meaner instincts that are really a part of the DNA of the United States. So what happens if you smash all of that? Could get pretty ugly. And so we're in really uncharted territory.
Is there any similarities? But now maybe the resurgence of political violence, maybe it would be one-off with what happened with Charlie Kirk, but there was also the attempted assassination on Trump.
We just had an ICE shooting.
And in Minnesota also the assembly members, I guess. Is there any similarities between the 60s, 70s with the political violence? And I don't know if there are any conclusions about that era, why it happened that densely at that time. And this period of time?
Yeah, and there's also an interesting parallel to the 1880s. So after the 1860s, we had the Civil War, freed the slaves, and tried to do reconstruction, tried to do a refounding of the United States on social justice values, which foundered and amid a massive economic crisis, and produced a Gilded Age and a period of purposelessness and drifting, and characterized by a lot of political violence, including McKinley getting assassinated by a crazy anarchist, and including lots of anarchist bombings and anarchists, but a lot of young men who couldn't chase the American dream. There was a period of rapid industrialization where people could not, it was again a process of they felt like they weren't doing better than their parents were. Similarly, in the 60s, you had the World War II, and then the New Deal and the Civil Rights Movement, a period of purpose and forward progress. JFK is going to go to the moon, and the new frontier. And then that kind of crashes into this oblivion of inflation and economic decline, and then political violence, in a sense that the country was adrift again. And I think the parallels now are pretty straightforward. Like, there was a sense out of the Iraq War and the financial crisis that we were going to come together and refound the country on popular social democratic values, and that didn't happen. And so here we are now facing this, we're at each other's throats on social media, and this AI looms around, and there's a deep sense of purposelessness, again, of just a void that is then filled with violence. Meaningless violence, kind of in search of meaning. So I think those three eras are similar, and so, and I worry that, and I want to learn more about this ICE shooting that we had yesterday or the day before. But he was searching a lot about Charlie Kirk, so there is a sense that these acts of random violence, high-profile, spectacular acts of violence, then are seen by other troubled people as, well, that's an answer to something, and then they just replicate and reproduce in a downward spiral.
Thanks a lot.
That'll be
Hoping
great. Yes.
for more optimistic further interviews in the future.
Yes.
Ryan, thanks a lot for being with us.
I hope I can give you something better in the future.
Thanks.